So we're going to look at how you can enhance your Koha data records and some new features that we've been working on. So, is that right? How do I make sure it's full screen? Yeah. So, Bibliographic Data Services, BDS, what it says there, they are the leading supplier of bibliographic metadata to libraries. We've been working with them for quite a few years. They provide a lot of different services, and we will be, thank you very much, we will be concentrating on just one of them today. And that's called, well, we call it BDS Auto Response. But I realized when I was preparing this that they called it the BDS EDI model. So I thought we wouldn't change the name because we're used to it being BDS Auto Response. So what it's about, really, for us, is how BDS integrates with Koha, which it does in a two-way direction. So we can send records to them, those records get enhanced, and then they're sent back to Koha. So I took this slide from the Koha manual, actually, which is quite a nice slide. It describes the EDI workflow. We're not actually looking at the whole EDI workflow today, but we're just looking at the bit that is those first three boxes in red. So librarian starts on the supplier website, chooses some things to order, and then the supplier sends what we call an EDIFACT quote message automatically, which contain details of the order. They send that to Koha. And then that quote message is loaded into Koha, and baskets and orders are created, and stub records, as they are created in Koha. And this is the point where the BDS part of the workflow jumps off. So, what are we doing with the auto response? There are three phases to it, and I hope you like the nice moon analogy I've done here. We've got the first phase is submitting your ISBNs to BDS. The second is retrieving the records from them, and the third is loading them to Koha. So let's just run through a little bit of the detail of that. Before which, this is the workflow from the original BDS auto response that was written by my colleague Colin, who retired a few years ago. And that's quite the flow chart, isn't it? You'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to read it all out, but he was the guy who was able to write all the code behind what is today the BDS auto response plugin. And I learned a lot of the coding that I know from basically trying to understand Colin's scripts. So that was quite good for me. So the three phases. First phase, submit ISBNs. So as I said earlier, we've had the EDI message come back from the supplier. The quotes are on Koha, and these appear in what's called a trace log, which is a file on the Koha system. And we look inside that, and we get a list of the ISBNs for the books that were ordered today. So this is something that usually libraries have this running on a nightly process. No reason why you can't run it more frequently if you want to, but most are doing it at night. So we grab the list of ISBNs from that, and we FTP them over to BDS, and that's phase one. Phase two, this is BDS has a routine that runs at 1/2 every hour, where they take your ISBNs and they look for matches in their database to see whether they've got some nice new Pucker MARC records to supply for us. And if they have, they will supply those MARC files and put them in a particular folder. And as I was looking at this recently, I realized there's actually quite a lot more in there than we even use. There's a lot of logs in there. So not only does it tell you what it will supply, but it tells you what it can't supply. So I think, still working with Colin's script and still trying to understand it several years later, I think it's an iterative process whereby if that record isn't here today, it'll look for it tomorrow or the next day. So you will get it when that record comes in. But effectively, what we're interested in is those MARC exchange files. And this phase of the script retrieves those mark files back to the Koha server using FTP. And the final stage, which is using long-established Koha tools that lots of us are familiar with, is to take those mark records, stage them, match them usually on the ISBN, and then load the records into Koha, thus enhancing the stub records and creating nice new full records. So we've now got the full moon, you see there. I've had to reduce it from 8 phases down to 3 for this purpose. So then a few years ago, we decided it would be quite nice if customers could have a bit more access to the configuration. Not because we're lazy and we don't like configuring customers' stuff, but we thought they might like to be able to configure it themselves from within Koha. So this is where the idea came for writing a plugin, the BDS auto response plugin. It also allows you to run the process manually. So if you, at the moment, it's all scheduled from the cron job, as I say, once a day. But sometimes you might want to say, oh, we just want to submit our orders now and get them back. So it means you can run it direct from Koha as well. So that's a nice feature. So that plugin has been in there for quite a time. This is basically the log, which is showing you, not the log, the configuration area to show you what you can do. You've got things like the FTP address, username and password. Couple of things there. The match field is the 020 usually, which is ISBN, but it also works with EAN, which I think is to do with sort of buying stuff for your shop as opposed to books. I'm not really sure what that is, but that uses the 024 field in a marked record, so it automatically does that. And then further down the same screen, you can configure a little bit more granularity in terms of, well, first of all, you need to actually say where you want to deposit it. Otherwise, it won't know where to put the files or retrieve them from. So you have to have that. Some sites have very specific directories for different types of record that they're getting from BDS. Like they'll have a different one for ebooks than perhaps standard print records, et cetera, et cetera. So it means you can actually put a whole list of directories for it to iterate through rather than having to have everything in the one directory. So that's what those are for. And then we've got the option if you want to map your framework codes. So you have the mark cataloging frameworks in Koha, and in the mark record, the leader 6 and 7 can be mapped to them. So A and M for 6 and 7 here are mapping over to BK book. Obviously, yours will be different on your system, but you map them as you want to. Or you can have a default framework. Well, the default framework is basically if none of the others match. And actually, if it's empty, it still puts BK, I think, at the moment. The final one at the bottom, that's the match rule. So at the moment, many systems, if you look at the list of match rules in Koha, the first one is number 1, the second is number 2, so you have to get the number. Most people's number 1 is ISBN. But if you had another field that you wanted to match on, you just put the relevant number in and it will match on that field instead. And that's what it uses. So really what I wanted to talk about today is an enhancement that we've done this year for Loughborough. So Loughborough came to us, they said, oh, we'd like to use BDS. We've got the UNICAP license. We want to upgrade our order records, please. And we said, oh, no problem, we'll set you up. We've done it with many other sites. So I worked with particularly Jane at Loughborough, who's provided me with some of the information that's on here today, which I'm thankful for. And she's supplied here a list of basically their current workflow, or the one that they used before they were using BDS. So it's a bit small. I'll just sort of go through it. They have orders that are sent to various different suppliers who can supply marked records. Some of those are via EDI. Some of those are not via EDI. They're sort of more manual. So the ones that are EDI can be received from the vendor via SFTP. So you can see a bit like the BDS uses SFTP. And they then manually import their records to Koha. And if it's an ebook record, some catalogers do some updating on that, but that's basically it. And what they wanted is this bit down here. They wanted for us to be able to distinguish between their EDI records and send those through the BDS route as per normal, as it were. But they also wanted us to be able to send non-EDI records. So those are ones that are just orders that are put on the system through to BDS and do the BDS auto response stages that you have there. So that's what they wanted. Earlier on, we were like, well, this is going to be no problem at all. We did hit a little bit of a roadblock. At the moment, or before, you used to have those EDI quotes, which I talked about earlier, and they weren't running EDI quotes. So we were like, oh dear, what do we do? So before we said, no, we can't do anything, had a bit of a think, and I thought, well, why are we only submitting BDS? Why are we only submitting ISBNs that come through the EDI quotes route? Because they're just records, aren't they? So I tried to think, well, what is the most flexible way that you could potentially submit records that might give a bit more flexibility and allow them to join the process, if you like. So this is where I came up with a new route, which is, being a data person, write a MySQL report, which is obviously the answer to all questions. And we just submit on the basis of whatever you put in that report, those records will be submitted. So I enhanced the plugin for that, and it's upgraded. It's version 2.0. You can see it there. And the only change you see in the config is that instead of using EDI trace log, you can opt to use a MySQL report instead. So you tick that. Now, as I said earlier, all this runs in the cron at the moment, so it's scheduled. And the way I wrote it, just to get it working really, was you have to have a report running, and the report goes into a particular directory, and that's what the plugin looks for. So on here, on their cron, their report number 472 is the one that drives it. So report 472 is the only one they have to worry about when they're wanting to see what to submit. And that is good old report 172. Not a particularly sophisticated one, really. It does a little bit of regexing to make sure you're only getting the ISBNs and no other extraneous data. But it's basically selecting from the baskets where the vendors are 1402, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vendors, which they told me they wanted to use. And it's also filtering on the date that they closed their basket as being today. That's what cur date is today. So that is running every night and putting today's ISBNs in the folder that BDS auto response can then send through to do the business. So then we entered into an extensive range of testing on Loughborough's test server. We started with just one vendor. We have very good liaison with BDS. They're very responsive, and every morning we would get a spreadsheet from Heather or Sarah saying these are the ones that went through last night, and these are the ones that were hit or miss. That worked. We added another vendor. We put that filter in about the basket needing to be closed for that day. And we got it working. And this is Jane saying, for her, it was a game changer because it meant they could send all their book orders automatically on a daily basis. So this is wider on their system than just EDI produced. And it doesn't rely on it just being EDI quotes. We then put it on the live server. They've been running with it for a couple of months now. Everything appears to be fine, touch wood. And this is basically the comment from Jane. She's saying basically she thinks it's a better workflow than if they'd just been confined to EDI quotes. Collaborative endeavor. As usual, it's obviously 2 steps forward and 1 back. But it was a good project that we worked on, and I think everybody's pretty pleased with it. So I guess what I'm saying is it's here. So if anybody needs something like this, we can help you set this up. The only thing to just be a little bit aware of is obviously normally you're probably putting through 100 orders or whatever it might be. You could potentially select everything from your catalogue and send it to BDS. I don't think they'd be very happy with that. So maybe if you're, doing a report that's got hundreds of thousands of records, have a word with them before just doing that. As I say, they are very responsive. We've worked well with them, and that was an enjoyable project to work on. Any future enhancements? Thinking of quite like that report not to be hard-coded in the cron, so you can just decide which one you want to run in real time using when you're running it properly. And just a note here, very tentative note, we're still using SFTP, which is robust, but not exactly the most modern of technology. BDS are doing things with API, and I suspect there may be a route to using APIs a year or two down the road for us to keep an eye out for. And that's it. So any questions? Very welcome.